This Parsha Podcast is dedicated in loving memory and leilui nishmas David Gedaliah ben Efraim, the unforgettable Dr. David Genecov of blessed memory, whose third yartzeit was today. May his soul be elevated in heaven. It's a celebratory week in the Wolbe family and in the Torch family. Rabbi Aryeh Wolbe was blessed with a grandson this week. Our nephew Dovi and his wife Adina were blessed with a son. We want to wish a hearty mazel tov to Rabbi Aryeh and Zahava Wolbe, to Dovi and Adina Wolbe, to the entire extended family. May this young prince bring lots of joy and pride to his family, to his nation, and to his creator. It's Parshas Chayei, a delightful Parsha as they all are, and our Parsha has three major narratives. It starts off with the life and the passing of Sarah. At the age of 127, she passes. Abraham mourns her, he bewails her, he eulogizes her, he negotiates a burial site for her, the cave of Machpelah, the cave of the Patriarchs, the cave in which Adam and Eve were buried, Abraham and Sarah were buried, Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob and Leah, and of course, Esav's decapitated head. He buries her. That's the first part of the Parsha. The second part of the Parsha is a long description of Eliezer, Abraham's right-hand man and confidant, going to find a wife for Isaac. He travels to the east. He secures Rebekah as a spouse. He brings her back, and they marry. And the Parsha ends with the epilogue, so to speak, of Abraham's life. He marries Keturah, which is another name for Hagar, and he bears 6 more sons with her. He sends the Keturhites away with gifts, and Abraham dies and is buried in the cave. And at the end of the Parsha, Ishmael dies, and we read about the families of Ishmael. He has 12 sons, which a lot of the families of our book of Genesis, of our family, have 12 sons. At the end of Parshas Vayera, so last week's Parsha, we read how Nachor, which is Abraham's brother, he has 12 sons. At the end of this week's Parsha, Parshas Chayei, we read how Ishmael had 12 sons. At the end of Parshas Vayishlach, we read about Esav's 12 sons. And of course, much of our book is going to be oriented around the 12 sons of Jacob, the 12 tribes of Israel. This is a perfect Parsha for year 10 of the Parsha Podcast to explore it backstage. So let's begin. The Parsha begins with the life and the passing of Sarah. Vayu Chayei Sarah, the years of Sarah were 100 years and 20 years and 7 years. These are the years of the life of Sarah. She was 100, she was 20, she was 7, she was 127. Now Rashi tells us that this event happened in the direct aftermath of the binding of Isaac at the end of last week's Parsha. When Isaac was bound up with the intention of being sacrificed, someone reported that to Sarah, and from the shock of the report, Isaac's being bound up for a sacrifice on Mount Moriah, she passed. And Abraham came to eulogize her and to bewail her. What is the content of Abraham's eulogy? What message did he share at the burial of Sarah? So the Midrash tells us, very interesting, that he shared the final verses of the book of Proverbs. The final 22 verses of Proverbs, of Mishlei. It's a very famous passage. It's the woman of valor, Eshes Chayil, a woman of valor. Miyim, so who could find such a woman? Her worth is more precious than pearls. Batach balev bala, the heart of her husband can rely upon him, can rely upon her. And the Midrash explains how each one of these wonderful verses applied to Sarah. She does good for him, never bad, all the days of her life. She looks for wool and flax. All these things are references to events in Sarah's life. Lo sira levesa mishalet. She has no fear for her house for snow. She's not worried about snow. Why? Because her whole house, lavush shanim, is dressed in crimson. What does this mean? So Midrash tells us, very interesting, that there's a type of purgatory called snow. We think of purgatory as fire. Well, there's another purgatory. It's snow. And she's not worried of this snowful purgatory. Why? Because her house is full of shanim, which means crimson, but also it's the same words as shnaim, which means two, and that's the Shabbos and the Milah, the circumcision. The Midrash tells us, Abraham is revealing here that these two mitzvos, the mitzvah of Shabbos and of circumcision, they are what spare members of this household from Gehenna. Very interesting. I recommend everyone goes to the Midrash and reads it. Each one of these 22 verses, how they relate to Sarah. He wants to find a burial spot, and there's a very particular place that he targets. There is a cave in a field that's owned by a gentleman named Efraim. And Efraim says, just take it. It's yours. Between me and you, what is it? It's just nothing. It's negligible. It's immaterial. And the Talmud tells us that Efraim, he is the paradigmatic example of a wicked person who over-promises and under-delivers. He says, between me and you, what is it? It's nothing. It's immaterial. It's unsubstantial. There's nothing to it. Take it. That's what he initially promises. Ultimately, he says, no, I want you to pay top dollar. 400 silver coins of the best variety, the coins that are accepted everywhere. Universal coins. Kruger rands. That's what I want. The best of the best. And Abraham, he's a righteous one. He under-promises and over-delivers. When did he under-promise? 3 travelers came to him. And he says, come, stop, and I'll give you a little bit of bread. Ve'ekcha pas lechem. Take a little bit of bread. And what does he do? That's the promise. The promise is a little bit of bread. What does he deliver? He runs and he hunts down and he gets the animals and he slaughters 3 animals, 3 tons with mustard. There's a transfer here of this parcel of land from the wicked who overpromise and underdeliver to the righteous who underpromise and overdeliver. When all is said and done, there will be 8 people buried in this cave. Adam and Eve, they of course preceded Sarah and Abraham. Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah, and Jacob and his wife Leah. Plus Esav's decapitated head. We know the story. When they bring Jacob from Egypt, where he passed, to the cave of the Machpelah, they arrive there and Esav is there. And he says, there's only one more spot. There's one more spot there. And that spot's mine. You can't bury Jacob there. It's my spot. Jacob already used his spot when he buried his wife Leah there. And they responded, but don't you remember? You sold this spot, this final burial spot, to Jacob. Jacob made a big pile of all the gold and silver that he acquired out of the land of Israel and gave it to you in exchange for your burial spot in the cave. I don't remember such a transaction. I need some documentation. Oh no, we left the documentation in Egypt. So they sent Naphtali to hustle back to Egypt to go fetch that contract. Meanwhile, there's a young man whose name is Hushim, who's the son of Dan, who is a grandson of Jacob, who is deaf, and he doesn't get what's happening. And he communicates to someone, what's going on? Why are they not burying Jacob, my grandfather? And they point to that big bad man, that ruddy-faced uncle. Esav is not allowing it. What? That is totally unconscionable. He takes a sword. He slices off Esav's head. Esav's head rolls into the cave. And Jacob is indeed interred. So we have 8 people and 1 head in this cave. Now, why did Abraham covet this spot in particular? So the Midrash tells us that in last week's Parsha, when Abraham was chasing after that runaway calf, he was chasing and chasing and chasing until the calf went into a cave. He has to get this calf to go feed his travelers that came to visit him 3 days after his circumcision. He gets to the cave, and he sees inside there that Adam and Eve are buried there. Moreover, he smells the very special aroma of the Garden of Eden. It was such a spiritually holy place. The only way to perceive it was with the sense of smell. Adam and Eve were buried there for a particular reason. Midrash tells us that the cave of the Patriarchs is adjacent to the entrance to paradise. And Adam, of course, used to be a resident of paradise until he was booted. He was banished. He was evicted. And he very much wanted to go back. He wanted to re-enter into paradise, but he was not allowed. He found this cave, and the cave bore the distinct aroma of paradise. And he started digging until the heavenly voice said, "You must stop. You may dig no further." So he said, if I cannot enter through this portal to paradise, at least let me be buried here. So when Eve died, she was buried there. And when Adam died, he was buried there. And then many generations later, Abraham rediscovers this cave, buries Sarah there, and has himself be buried there as well. Now, it is interesting that the Talmud tells us that there's someone who over-promises and under-delivers, and that's the original owner of the cave. And he sold it to Abraham, who under-promises and over-delivers. And when did Abraham discover this cave? It's specifically when he was over-delivering. He wants to go chase down the calf to feed to his weary guests. Specifically when he's engaging in the ultimate act of over-delivery, that's when he discovers it. So something about this place and the secret of this place that is related to Abraham's penchant for under-promising and over-delivering. But that's the cave of the Patriarchs. According to the Zohar, if you want to pray, you have to find a way to take your prayer and elevate it to the other dimensions. Well, how do you do that? So the Zohar says your prayer has to travel all the way to Hebron, to the cave of the Patriarchs, because that's the portal to heaven. Very interesting, very fascinating. Now, a few years ago, I made an observation that I still liked so much, I want to say it again. Abraham, he bought this cave, he bought this field. He's in fact buried there, together with, of course, Sarah and Adam and Eve and so on. There is a midrash that says that Abraham sits at the entrance of a different location. Says the midrash, Abraham was sitting at the entrance of his tent at the heat of the day. Says the midrash, that's a reference to Abraham's maybe other role. There's a very hot place that Abraham sits at its entrance. Abraham, says the midrash, he sits at the entrance of Gehenna, of purgatory. He's the gatekeeper of purgatory. And every person that's a candidate to enter that place, Abraham examines if they bear the covenant of Abraham. Are they circumcised or not? And if they are circumcised, if they're living by the Abrahamic ideal, Abraham does not allow them to enter. And the Midrash says, a step further, the Midrash says, if there is someone who is circumcised, but is so sinful that they really need the cleansing of purgatory, then they have to artificially reverse their circumcision. They have to reattach the foreskin. That's what it says. Don't look at me. That's what it says. And only then they can enter Gehenna. Now what that means, it's a very fascinating midrash. But it occurred to me Abraham buys a cave. That's the portal. That's the entrance to paradise. He's also the gatekeeper of paradise, and he is the gatekeeper of Gehenna. That's certainly not a coincidence. And I think certainly on the most basic level, you want access to heaven and you want to avoid the other place, connect with Abraham and the Abrahamic ideal. That is your best course of action. The Parsha proceeds talking about the pursuit of a spouse for Isaac. Abraham summons his confidant, Eliezer. I want you to go find a spouse for Isaac. And there's one non-negotiable criterion. There's one deal breaker. She cannot be a Canaanite. You have to go fetch her, bring her here, non-Canaanite. And under no circumstances are you to take Isaac and bring him there. Now, of course, the subtext of the story is that the man who is appointed to do this, Eliezer, he himself is a Canaanite. He's the same one who drew from the wellsprings of Abraham's Torah and taught it to others. And he himself had a very eligible daughter, and he really wanted Isaac to marry his daughter. Who wouldn't want that? But Abraham told him, Canaan, the Canaanites, were cursed by Noah. I was blessed by God. Blessing and curse don't intertwine. And therefore, Isaac's wife cannot be a Canaanite. And Abraham didn't simply subsist with making that request. He made him swear. He made him take an oath by placing his hand under Abraham's thigh. Why by the thigh? Of course, to make an oath, you hold something which is holy. And Abraham has the mitzvah of circumcision near his thigh. That was holy. And therefore, that's the venue where Eliezer, or the neighborhood, shall we say, where Eliezer placed his hand in order to affirm the sanctity of this oath. So Eliezer travels. He has 10 camels laden with all the wealth of Abraham, goes back east to Abraham's family and hometown. And he arrives, he goes to the well, and he devises a plan. How are we going to find a suitable spouse for Isaac? I'm going to make a test. I'm going to ask the prospective spouse for water, and the one who gives me water, but is able to understand that I need something more than just water for myself. I need water from the camels. The one who recognizes that and gives water to the camels without being prompted, without being asked, that's the one whom you, Almighty God, designated for Isaac. And why is this the litmus test? So Rashi, of course, tells us Abraham's empire and destiny and legacy is built on an empire of kindness. Everything that Abraham did was kindness. Even the faith that he promoted was kindness. Kindness and hospitality is the basis of all that Abraham did. And the definition of kindness is to think about other people and to try to understand them where they are at. Try to get into their heads. Don't just respond to what you're told, to what they tell you, but to try to really understand, to burrow into someone else's life and perspective to see what they're going through and what they need. So Rebekah was not told that Eliezer needed water for his camels, but a true paragon of kindness always thinks, what do they actually need? He certainly needs water for his camels too. And indeed, right after Eliezer makes this prayer and devises this test, Rebekah comes out. And she's beautiful and she's worthy, and the water comes up to her. Miracles are happening for her. And he asks her for water, and she fulfills the test. Gives water to him, gives water to the camels, and he is just absolutely mind blown by this. And he gives her jewelry. Turns out she's actually from Abraham's family. And then he meets the family. They negotiate. They get some cold feet, but ultimately they agree to send Rebekah with this man back to Canaan. And indeed, they travel back to Canaan, and they happen to serendipitously bump into Isaac. Isaac he's praying, and he's heading in one direction, and who do they bump into? they rendezvous with the group coming back with Rebekah. And there's a very interesting description of the first interaction that Isaac and Rebekah had. She saw him, and she immediately covered herself with a scarf, and she fell or slid off the camel. Isaac was basically an angel. He had such an intense visage of holiness. She'd never seen anyone like that. And she was so moved by it and stunned by it, she fell off the camel. And she instinctively covered her face with a scarf. Now, I saw Midrash this year for the first time. The Midrash made an observation that we would miss. If we read the Torah 1,000 times, we'd miss it. Says the Midrash, it's like one line. 2 women wore scarves. Who's that? That's Rebekah and Tamar, Judah's daughter-in-law. And 2 women bore twins. And who's that? Rebekah, of course, Jacob and Esau, and Tamar, Peretz, and Zerach. That's what the Midrash says. Bereshis Rabbah 60:15. It's not a coincidence. The 2 women that wore scarves, they bore twins. So if you want to have twins, wear scarves. Apparently, that's what the Midrash is telling us, right? What's the possible connection between these two? What's the connection between scarf wearing and twins? I don't know. I did look at some of the commentaries, and they say that it probably has something to do with modesty, that when a woman covers herself, it's an act of modesty, and modesty may be positions a woman spiritually to have children, more than one maybe, to have twins. Okay, interesting. But the episode ends, that Isaac brings his new wife into the tent of Sarah, and he marries her, and she is to him for a wife, and he loves her, and he is comforted after the passing of his mother. Now, what does this verse mean? So Rashi tells us that he brought her into Sarah's tent, and she became an example of a Sarah-like person. She's like Sarah's mother. Why? Because when Sarah was alive, there were miracles. There was a candle that was lit from one Friday, Shabbos Eve, to the next Friday, Shabbos Eve. And there was a special blessing found in the dough. And there was a spiritual cloud hovering over the tent. 3 ever-present miracles. Sarah passes, the miracles cease. And now Rebekah is brought into Sarah's tent. And when Rebekah entered Sarah's tent, the miracles resumed. And that's why Isaac was comforted. He has found a replacement. There is a spiritual beacon as bright as Sarah now once again in his life. Now, one of the questions I get maybe the most often about this Parsha: how old was Rebekah when she married Isaac? I can't tell you how many times I've gotten this question many, many times. So if you look at Scripture, it doesn't say it explicitly. Scripture says, well, Isaac was 40 when he got married, but how old was Rebekah? It doesn't say. You open up the Midrash, and you find different figures. In one citation, it says that Rebekah was 14. In a second Midrash, it says that Rebekah was 3. Now, 14 may be a bit young by our standards. It's not unprecedented historically. I bet everyone listening right now has an ancestor in the not too distant past who got married at that age. It was common. 200 years ago, it was very common. Teenagers got married all the time. But how do we understand the other opinion? Isaac married a 3-year-old? A child? It seems very strange. So the way I always answer this question is I don't know what it meant in the 3,500 years ago, and the Midrash tells us that she was 3 years old. But I know for sure that Scripture tells us that she was obviously old enough to be a shepherdess. She was clearly old enough, mature enough, capable enough to oversee sheep. And she's big enough and strong enough to take a pail and go to the well and extract copious amounts of water from the well. I don't know what it means that she was 3, but she obviously was not a tiny child. Again, her own family sent her on her own with a pail to the well. So obviously it's not what we think of as a toddler. I'm blessed by the Almighty to have a 3-year-old, very capable 3-year-old, but not that capable. But then I saw something very interesting, very fascinating. We read about the birth of Rebekah in the immediate aftermath of the binding of Isaac. At the very end of the binding of Isaac episode, you have the family of Nahor, and the fact he has a son named Bethuel, and he has a daughter named Rebekah. And our sages tells us that those are not coincidences. Indeed, when Isaac was offered as a sacrifice, the binding of Isaac, that's when Rebekah was born. But according to our sages, something happened to Isaac by the binding. You read the episode simply, and you say, well, we dodged the bullet, right? Abraham was told to go sacrifice Isaac, and at the last second, at the 90th minute, at the 11th hour, the angel said, oh, stop. Okay, it was just a test. But the sages, and certainly the Kabbalistic literature, they agreed that something very profound happened to Isaac. Now, if you read the story, Abraham travels with 2 lads. Rashi tells us that's Ishmael and Eliezer. So it's Abraham and Isaac and all the provisions for a sacrifice, and Ishmael and Eliezer travel for 3 days. He tells the other 2, wait over here with the donkey. We're going to go up and we're going to bow and we're going to come down. A flash of prophecy that actually Isaac will not be slaughtered. And this incredible event happened, the binding of Isaac, and at the last moment, the angel stops Abraham. And then it's over, right? Abram's given some blessings, and now I know that you truly fear God. Abram renames the mountain. Okay. And then Abraham goes back down. And Abraham alone goes back down. It's very clear in Scripture. Well, what happened to Isaac? It's not clear. Our sages tell us that there was a renaissance that happened to Isaac. According to one version, he had a female soul that departed him, and he was replaced with a new soul. According to another version, his soul departed, but then he got a new soul. There was some sort of renewal to Isaac during the binding. Rebekah, if she was 3 at their marriage, that means she was born right when the binding happens. Why? Because the binding happened when Isaac was 37 and he got married when he's 40, so that's 3 years later. So if you say that she was 3, it means that she was born at that same time. What the commentaries suggest is that when Isaac was offered as a sacrifice, so Sarah died, and Isaac on some level lost his soul, got a new one. What happened to Sarah's soul? Sarah's soul, just as Isaac's soul was replaced, was upgraded, was changed, Rebekah's soul was upgraded, was replaced, was changed. And it's quite likely that Sarah's soul that departed her entered Rebekah. Rebekah was already 11 years old at the time. She was already alive. And when she got married, she was 14. Young by our standards, but not by historical standards. But she was also 3 because her new soul, namely the soul of Sarah that entered her, was only within her for 3 years. And Isaac takes his new wife, brings her to Sarah's tent. You read the words of Rashi very carefully. He brings her to the tent. Well, there were miracles that happened with Sarah's miracles. What do you know? It happens with Rebekah too. V'harei he Sarah imo. Behold, she is Sarah, his mother. That's what Rashi says. We read that as, well, she's like Sarah. She's like such a righteous person. She's like Sarah. No. She actually bears the same soul of Sarah. The Midrash says, V'zarach Hashemesh uba Hashemesh. The sun sets, the sun rises. The sun sets here, and it rises somewhere else. And it's the same sun. Sarah dies, Rebecca is born. And that's the same thing. That's the same sun. That's the same soul. I want to go back to the first verse of the Parsha and share a few ideas, and then one more idea from the middle of the Parsha, or more of a broad analysis of some of the personalities and families of Genesis. You read the first verse of the Parsha, it talks about the life of Sarah. Vayu Chayei Sarah, the life of Sarah was 100 years, and 20 years, and 7 years. It doesn't say 127 years, it says 100 years, and 20 years, and 7 years. Of course, that raises everyone's alarm bells. What's going on? What is the Torah telling us? You could have made this more concise. 127 years, I know what that means. 100 years, 20 years, 7 years, there's something to be learned over there. And then it ends off, Shnei Chayei Sarah. The years, these were the years of Sarah. So the whole thing's a bit apparently inartfully phrased. You could have said, Sarah lived 127 years. These are the years of Sarah, 127. No, the years of Sarah were 100 years, 20 years, 7 years. These were the years of Sarah. So all the commentaries are trying to figure out what's going on over here. So one idea from the Balaturim, the first word of the Parsha is Vayiyu. Gematria, Vav is 6, Yud is 10, He is 5, Yud, a second Yud is 10, plus a Vav. Well, what's that? It's exactly 37. Sarah's life was 37. She had a son when she was 90. She passed when she's 127. The essence of Sarah's life was only 37. Wow, that's one hint. She only had 37 years that she had Isaac, from the age of 90 to the age of 127. Okay, one idea. Another idea. The verse ends, Shnei Chayei Sarah, the years of the life of Sarah. That's the first verse of our Parsha. If you omit those words, you say simply, and these were the life of Sarah was 100 years, was 20 years, was 7 years, you know it's 127. The final 3 words of this verse could apparently be omitted. Why does the verse find it necessary to add these words? So Rashi tells us, when the verse recaps the life of Sarah, it means that there's some sort of equality in all the years of Sarah. Kulan shavin letova, they're all equally good. Sarah lived 127 years, and they were all equally good. Now, that's a pretty baffling statement if you consider Sarah's life. She had a very chaotic life. She's traveling with Abraham, and they leave Haran, and they go to Canaan with nothing, and there they encounter the worst famine in human history, and to go to Egypt, and she's abducted, and she's infertile for 70 years. And she had to give up exclusivity of her husband by encouraging Abram to marry Hagar. And she's abducted a second time by a second king, Avimelech. Her whole life was a series of tribulations. How can you say they were all equally good? So here's a powerful idea. When we think of a good life, someone says, oh, he lived a good life. What does that mean? They have a charmed existence, a good life. Some may say, to live a good life, to be successful, it means to be comfortable, to have a high income, to have a high socioeconomic standing. When you say someone is successful, oh, they're very successful, what does that mean in our parlance? Does it mean that they have a large and loving family? Does it mean that they have a direct relationship, an intimate and close relationship with the Creator? Does it mean that they're on a path to eternity due to their righteousness? Most often, in common discussion, we see someone is successful. It means that they're successful professionally. If the Torah is telling us that Sarah's years were all good, it means they were all spiritually good. She was spiritually successful in all her years. And that's a very powerful insight. Sarah's life, it wasn't smooth sailing. She has to uproot herself from her home and travel. Travel from Ur-Kasdim to Haran, from Haran to Canaan, all over the land of Canaan, go to Egypt. That's a very chaotic part of life. She's abducted twice. She's experiencing infertility. She's dealing with a lot of challenges. And in all her years, the Torah testifies, they were all equally spiritually good. She had many chaotic, tumultuous years. She was thrust into very difficult circumstances. And in all those years, she was good. She was spiritually good. She was spiritually successful. There's a famous episode of the two brother Hasidic masters who were placed in jail. They're placed in jail. This is the brothers Elimelech and Zusha, the two legendary Hasidic masters. And they're put in jail. And what did two great sages do in jail? They study Torah. And before long, the jail attendant, he comes and he places a pail of refuse. I guess they didn't have running water. So people in the jail, they would have to, use the facilities. There was just like a pail there. And that's wonderful and fantastic, but it's very problematic because you want to study Torah. There are certain dirty places that you cannot study Torah in. So one of the brothers gets all sad and despondent and depressed. What are we supposed to do? We can't study Torah. And his brother says, no, you have it wrong. Beforehand, the Almighty wanted us to study Torah. And now, the Almighty wants us to not study Torah. So either way, we're fulfilling the will of God. So we have to celebrate. We have to start dancing. And meanwhile, the jail attendant sees these two bearded sages dancing. Why are you dancing? You're in jail. Why are you dancing? He says, well, we're dancing because we can't study Torah. We're so happy. Well, why can't you study Torah? Because we have this pail over here. He says, I'm going to make these Jews stop celebrating. He removes the pail. And they're able to once again continue studying. But the lesson is that in every situation, there's a way to live good spiritually. Sarah, there were certain times in her life where things were good. Abram was wealthy. They had this tent. They pitched the tent with the 4 doors, and they were able to welcome guests and feed guests and provide food and spiritual nourishment as well to the passerby, and fulfill their lifelong mission of spreading the name of God throughout the world. That's a positive spiritual environment where you can actively do what you think the Almighty wants you to do. Sometimes you're in a circumstance that's not ideal. You don't see the pathway to do what you think the Almighty wants you to do. It's not auspicious times. But in every situation, in every environment, in every circumstance, there's the right thing to do. And if you do the right thing, even in those non-ideal states, then those years could also be equally good. There's a way to make the right choices and to do what is incumbent upon you in every circumstance. And indeed, when the Torah recaps the life of Sarah, It says, these are the years of the life of Sarah. All the years, the high points, the low points, the ecstatic highs, and the very troubling nadirs, they're all equally good in every situation, in every circumstance. There's a way to do the right thing. And Sarah, no matter what, she did the right thing. I want to share one final idea. And this is a brand new idea. It's still a bit under construction. So let me know what you think about it. Rabbi@gmail.com. When Eliezer, he asks Rebecca what her family, who her family is. So she introduces herself. Chapter 24, verse 25. Bas Besuel Anochi. I'm the daughter of Besuel or Bethuel, who is the son of Milcah, who gave birth to him to Nahor. Okay? So Rebecca's father is Bethuel, and grandparents, meaning Bethuel's parents, one of them is called Milcah, and one of them is called Nahor. Nahor is her grandfather, and Milcah is her grandmother. Okay. Now, this is part of a very large family, and she is actually related to Abraham and to Isaac. Because who's this Nahor gentleman? Who is the paternal grandfather of Rebecca? Nahor is actually Abraham's brother. So she is Abraham's great niece. She's Isaac's first cousin once removed. She's part of this family. Now, this morning, I was teaching in the girls' high school. Actually, I made a family tree because there's a lot of different parts of this family. So, of course, you have Terach. Terach is Abraham's father. Well, if Abraham's brother is Nahor, that means that Nahor's father is also Terach. And there was a third brother whose name was Haran. So Terach has three sons: Avraham, Abraham, Haran, and Nahor. And if you map out all the different lines that this family goes to, it's all of our family comes from these three. How so? Of course, Abraham is, he's our forefather. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, of course. But Abraham's wife is Sarah. Who's Sarah? Sarah is the daughter of Haran. So Abraham married his niece. Now Haran, he's the brother of Abraham, and in this crazy way, he's also the father-in-law of Abraham. Right? Because Abraham married his daughter. Haran's daughter is Sarah, Abraham's wife. Haran has a son named Lot. We know about Lot. We read a lot about him. Haran has a second daughter, and that's Milcah, the grandmother of Rebecca. This is much easier if you map it out. So Terach, three sons. Haran has two daughters that marry his two brothers. Abraham marries Sarah, and Nahor marries Milcah. And Nahor and Milcah have a son named Besuel, along with many other sons, but Besuel is the one that we are focusing on. And he has a son named Laban, of course. And Laban has four daughters who marry Jacob. I know this is riveting radio. So it's riveting radio, all the family genealogy. I know it is. It's great. I mapped it all on the board. And they're like, what? Lot and Sarah were siblings? And then someone said, can't you find other people to marry? Everyone's marrying within the same family. What's happening over here? But this is a picture of the origins of the pedigree of the Jewish people. You have three sons of Terach. One of them is Abraham. Abraham's wife comes from the second one, and Isaac's wife comes from the third one. Isaac's wife and Jacob's wives. So Abraham comes from one line of this family, and then Sarah comes from the second line, Sarah and Lot. And then Rebecca and Jacob's four wives, Rachel, Leah, Rachel, Leah, and Bilhah and Zilpah, they come from that third line, from Nahor. Now, it's very interesting to me that at the end of Parshas Noach, this is when we're introduced to Abraham. So the verse tells us that Terach had three sons, and Haran, the one son who's the father-in-law of his two brothers, the father of Sarah and the father of Lot and the father of Milcah, He died in his father's lifetime. And we know the story. He died in very dramatic fashion. Why? Because Abraham, he was this discoverer and popularizer of monotheism. And that was totally unacceptable to the local rulers. And one of them, a man named Nimrod, he told Abraham, you could choose to have this belief in one God, but if you do that, I'm going to throw you into the fire. Do you still choose this one God? And Abraham said yes. And they made a fiery furnace. And everyone was invited to watch. Abraham will be executed for his crime. And according to the Midrash, this furnace was so hot, they couldn't bring Abraham to throw him into the furnace, because anyone who would go and approach this furnace would themselves be incinerated. So they had to put Abraham on a catapult, on a slingshot, to shoot him from a distance into the fire. And Abraham is flung into the fire. And the angel says, let me go quickly and cool down the fire. God says, no. Abraham is one person standing up against the whole world. He is the one solitary person, a lone man in the entire world. And I'm one. God is one. It makes sense for the one God to save the one Abraham. So God comes and saves him. Meanwhile, when this is all happening, there is a man in the crowd, and his name is Haran. He's Abraham's brother, also weirdly his father-in-law. And Haran was kind of torn between Abraham and Nimrod. He was very sympathetic to Abraham's ideas and persuasive arguments and philosophy. On the other hand, we've been doing idolatry for a long time. So he says, you know what, let's wait and see what happens here. We'll make a decision later. Abraham's put onto the slingshot, catapulted into the fire. It's a miracle. He survives. So Haran gets up and says, I'm with Abraham. And they put him onto the slingshot, and they fling him into the fire, and he gets roasted, incinerated. And of course, the reason is because Abraham went with the intention of dying. So there's an act of martyrdom, of self-sacrifice. That can evoke a miracle. Haran went with the intention of surviving. There's no sacrifice. No sacrifice is no miracle. But we see that Haran here is kind of close to Abraham. He's inspired by Abraham, and he's willing to, at least on a lower level, follow Abraham's way. At the end of Parshas Noach, Terach begins a journey to Canaan. Terach is he's the father of everyone. He's the patriarch here of this family. And he begins to go to Canaan. Why does he go to Canaan? Terach himself was an idolater, but he too was influenced by Abraham. And he too is motivated to begin a journey to the Holy Land. He too wants to examine more of what Abraham is teaching. And who joins them in that journey? So Abram comes with Sarah and Lot. So Terach, the grandfather, the patriarch, Abraham and his wife Sarah, and Lot. Now Haran's dead, right? But it's interesting to me that we have three sons of Terach, Abraham and Haran, of blessed memory, and Nachor. And Nachor doesn't join this journey. When Terach begins their journey to Canaan, Nachor stays behind. So the third part of the family, the part of the family that Isaac's wife Rebekah comes from, that Jacob's four wives all come from, that party is not at all interested in heading to Canaan, in heading to the Holy Land. But of course, ultimately, that part of the family joins the nation. When we look at this family, we see all parts of our people: Abram and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob and Rachel and Leah and his other two wives, Bilhah and Zilpah. All that comes from three branches of Terach's children. I wanted to suggest that there's three types of journeys that one can take to the Holy Land. Abraham, he personifies total self-sacrifice for God. He embodies the idea of a full measure, totally committed, 10 out of 10 tests. Throw me to fire, I don't care. 100% dedicated to God. He has a brother named Haran. Haran, he's kind of like the king of the half measure. Who am I with? I don't know. Am I with Nimrod? Am I with Abraham? So he's a little bit inspired, not fully inspired. Lot is Haran's son. And he's kind of like his dad, right? Because he joins Abraham. He goes to Canaan with Abraham. He goes to Egypt with Abraham, comes back to Canaan with Abraham. Ultimately, those paths diverge. He's not willing to stick with Abraham to the very end. He's a little bit like his dad in that he's a little bit with Abraham, not fully with Abraham. Half measures. Sarah, it's very interesting. In one place in the Torah, Sarah is not called Sarah, she's called Yisra. When is she called Yisra? It's precisely when she is attributed to her father Haran. And I wanted to suggest in the past that Sarah was not like Haran. Haran was with Abram a little bit. Sarah was 100% with Abram. They're 100% united. And therefore, when the Torah has to attribute her genealogically to Haran, it covers her identity. Don't think this is really Sarah. Sarah's not really with Haran. She's 100% with Abraham. And then there's Nahor. He's like the third part of this family. He's completely uninspired. Abraham is changing the whole world. Legions of followers, tens of thousands of followers. The souls that they made in Haran, and Nahor is just not moved. He doesn't jump into the fire, not originally with Abraham and not later on with Haran. He doesn't join Terach and Lot and Abraham and Sarah when they go to the land. He represents the kind of people that are not inspired at all. And everyone has to come to the Holy Land. Everyone has to ultimately join this family. So Abraham and Sarah, they're in 100%. And then we have this middle group. It's Haran. He's a bit vacillating between the different options. He's uncertain. He's willing to take a little bit, but he's not marked by full conviction. He's waffling. That's Lot. Lot, he's with Abraham. He sees Sodom and Amorah. He sees the glitz and the glamour and the sinfulness of Sodom. Like Dad, he's drawn to that. So what happens with Lot? He's inspired, not fully. He's a half measure. He's given a second chance. Haran, he doesn't quite make it, but his son, he joins Abraham. Okay. And then he drops off the train. But he's saved from Sodom. From Sodom. When Sodom is destroyed, he's saved. And Lot has a very important descendant. His descendant is Ruth the Moabite. And Ruth is given the exact same choice that Lot had, to go to the land or to stay behind, to fully embrace the agenda of Abraham or to fall off the train at the end of the journey, to not make it to the finish line. And what does she say? I am with you 100%. I'll die, even if it means I have to die, I'll die with you. I'll be buried with you. I don't care. I'm completely committed. Ruth is the actualization of what Haran and Lot began. They were both committed a little bit. They were both inspired a little bit to join Abraham. They both made significant steps. They didn't quite go the distance, but this family ultimately had an exemplar that was able to overcome and to get that last mile. And then Nahor, the third part of the family, he's completely withdrawn from the process of Abraham. And I find it very interesting. Everyone ends up in the land of Israel, one way or another. Of course, Ruth goes there. She travels there. Abraham travels there. Lot goes there, but he kind of leaves, and he has this reclamation at the hands of Ruth. The family of Nahor, we have representatives. We have Rebecca, we have Rachel and Leah and the other two wives. How do these women end up in the land of Israel? Eliezer has to go with 10 camels and fetch them. Jacob has to go there and bring them. We have to travel to them and bring them along. It seems to me that there's 3 ways to go the full distance. Like Abraham, some people are inspired. They do it on their own. Some people could go the distance completely. It's Abraham, it's Sarah. Some people have an inspiration, but that inspiration doesn't last. It wanes, it dissipates, it falls away. And maybe they could be given a second chance. Haran didn't quite do it. Lot didn't quite do it. A fourth chance, eventually they clinch it. And Ruth, of course, is the grandmother of Messiah. Messiah is born out of this struggle of being inspired, being moved, and having to really muscle through to the finish line. And some people are just not inspired at all. And those people, you got to go grab them and bring them along because they're not going to come on their own. I think it's fascinating. If this is the family, the broader family of our people, I imagine that there are different attitudes even amongst our people. Some people, they're just inspired on their own. They have something holy within them. They have this spirit of righteousness and holiness, like Sarah from the beginning of her life. All of her days were equally good. She was designated for greatness from day one. Abram was on a journey from the age of 3. He was very much motivated. And he doesn't need any support. He doesn't need a sa'ad l'tomcho. He doesn't need a boost. But there are 2 factions of this family that need a boost. They need a second chance, or they need to have someone come and grab them by the hand and bring them along. Everyone must come home. We all must come home. And I wonder how many of us are part of the camp of Abraham who could just be inspired on their own and be willing to go through all the tests and all the challenges and all the tribulations and all the challenges to actually finish and to have all of our days be good days. I imagine that there are some people that fall into that category. Other people are like in between, so to speak. They made some good choices, they made some poor choices, and they have to be given a second chance and a third chance and a fourth chance and a fifth chance. And eventually they'll have a heroic push to the finish line. And there are some who just need to have someone come and take them by the hand and bring them to the promised land. But that's what we all need to be. Of course, it means literally in the homeland, but it also means in our behavior, in our beliefs, in our values, in who we are spiritually, to be someone who's living by the Abrahamic ideals completely. Some of us need to have someone to hold our hand. I appreciate your attention to this Parsha podcast. It's Parsha's Chayei. We are 5 weeks in to year 10 of the Parsha podcast. We're going backstage. We're going to go a little bit beneath the surface and going to the subtext, the story behind the story, the insights that we would have missed, the storylines that maybe a first, a second, a third reading won't surface. Of course, we are aided and guided by our sages who always know how to plumb to the absolute depth of the Torah. I hope we're able to continue this for a full year. Please God of the Parsha Podcast from the Torch Center in Houston, Texas. My name is Yaakov Wolpe. I hope that you will send me an email when you listen to this. Most of the listeners already drop off. I know how it works. Listen to 20 minutes, 40 minutes, 45 minutes. Once it's like past 50 minutes, I can say whatever I want. Like you could hide any secret. If you have a deep, dark secret you want to say and get off your chest and hope that no one will hear it, just say it at the end of the podcast because no one listens to it anyhow. But if you're listening now, send me an email. What do I need to do to elicit an email? rabbiwolbe@gmail.com. Have a wonderful day. Have a magnificent and special and splendid rest of your week. And please God, an uplifting and meaningful and powerful and productive Shabbos upcoming. And please God, with the help of the Almighty, we'll talk to you next week. Again, the email address is rabbiwolbe@gmail.com.